In the United States, we've suffered massive attacks on our IT systems and theft of hundreds of millions of personal details, including government details, people from Equifax, the credit ratings, healthcare data has been stolen on a massive scale. Marriott reported the loss of 400 million, I believe, travelers and their ID details. So there's been a massive campaign to target the data about people and about our technology. So, but is there technology to steal in India? I apologize for not knowing the answer, but it would appear to me, in view of the sophistication of the Indians all around the world involved in technology activity, that there must be technology in India that the Chinese would want. Is there not?
So I'm going to jump in here, Bill, and maybe Amit can back me up. The Indian IT sector is really largely, this famous IT sector really caters to clients outside of India, not that much in India. And so there, our great IT industry is tied up with you. I mean, 65% goes into the US and it's sort of plugged into the guts of US corporations. And so if the Chinese are stealing data from Indian companies, it's really through the clients of the Indian companies. But what is really of particular concern, at the moment, we don't have, we're not like the US, you know, we're not a great technological innovation power as yet. That will start to happen. But what happens particularly on the border, you know, we live in the worst neighborhood in the world. We've got Pakistan on one side and we've got China on the other side. And they're both now in cahoots with each other. So on the northern borders, if you travel into the mountainous regions, the signals from China, the 5G is so strong that even our soldiers, our border security forces and the locals pick up the Chinese signals and the own Indian signals are just drowned out. Now that is very dangerous because they know exactly what we're doing. So that has been a matter of grave concern. And similarly with the Bangladesh side, and definitely on the side of Pakistan. So it is, I mean, these are, we can't begin to tell you. In Sri Lanka, don't forget Sri Lanka, the Chinese are there as well. So down south, there are other issues. And the Chinese have embedded themselves completely into our neighborhood. And Amit will tell you also that in terms of the reason the venture capital, the Chinese were so easy is they saw the Indian market first and they saw a very similar market. But India itself has not had a lot of venture capitalists step up. Unlike in the United States, the minute somebody becomes rich, they start giving money to other young people so they can become rich and everybody grows together. Indian wealth has not gone down to young people and their innovations. It just hasn't been part of the culture. So as Amit will say, the field was wide open for the Chinese, right?
Right. Well, let's talk about the one.
If I may just add.
Go ahead, Amit. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, so one is that in case of India, one advantage the Chinese investors have is that we don't, as Manjit pointed out, we don't have a venture capital industry domestically. So if I'm running a startup and I'm looking for, let's say, funding of $25 million or more, I probably do not have any domestic options at all. So perforce, I have to rely on foreign capital. And there are only 4 or 5 pools of foreign capital. And Chinese investors had become one very big such pool. The second part, I would just like to take a couple of minutes on that, is the One Belt, One Road initiative. And
please do so.
Yeah, India has largely avoided the physical One Belt, One Road. We became part of the virtual Silk Road. But in the 6 countries that border India, Pakistan, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Nepal, we have seen almost 400 Chinese projects come up in the last 6 or 7 years. And we were able to find a number of common factors between these projects. So one thing which we found almost always was overcapacity. For example, the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka is a case in point. It has been built at
yes, right.
Yes. So this port has been built at over cost of $1 billion, and that port gets traffic of, I think, 1 ship every week. So eventually it became a bad debt and Sri Lanka had to hand over the port to a Chinese company for 99 years. The second part we found was that there were padded costs. So power projects which were being done in Pakistan were anywhere from 20 to 50% costlier than similar projects being done in India. And the third part that we discovered was that the interest rates on these projects were very high. So Sri Lanka on many of the infrastructure projects was paying interest rate of LIBOR plus 3.5%. Pakistan was paying interest of 3.5 to 4% over LIBOR. When World Bank lends to a government for infrastructure, lending is LIBOR plus 0.5, 0.25, something like that. So you combine these three things and you have pushed the host country into a debt trap.
Yes, we call it, it's a well-known phenomenon now, the debt trap, happening in many countries in the world.